Good evening and welcome. This is Tonight with Tim Modise, and tonight we are going to discuss the growth of the South African economy and look at the opportunities that are being created in this economy, particularly those that affect the youth. As we all know, the situation is very dire in South Africa at the moment. The economic growth is almost non-existent as we speak, and a high number of people are unemployed in this country. We are appreciative and grateful to GIBS for giving us the venue to be with us, or rather getting us to get our guests to be with us here this evening, as well as M&S attorneys, my good friends, who said, okay, if you are going to do this kind of event, we want to be part of it. And I'm very grateful to both GIBS and M&S for making this possible for us. So let's not waste time and get the whole program going. Firstly, we're going to get the lay of the land report from the Stats SA economist Peter Perkins, who's going to talk to us. We'll also hear from Lumkile Mondi, economist from Wits University, who will be talking predominantly about the political economy and its performance. We'll hear from Ann Bernstein from the Center for Development Enterprise, who has ideas. They've done research and studies on how to resolve youth unemployment. And Pal Pillay, Director, Youth Lab South Africa, who will be talking to us about the bridging policies and the reality at the moment in South Africa. So, our hosts, GIBS, are represented by Senior Faculty Director Abdullah Veracha. And Abdullah, please welcome us.
Thank you. Tim, I didn't tell you this, but I'm going to say this now. In 2002, on the 16th of June, at the SABC, we had a conversation with President Thabo Mbeki that you chaired.
Yes.
And I sat right next to you because I was one of the panelists as a second-year university student. And I asked the question, and that was when we were an 8-year-old democracy at the time. I said, in 1976, young people in this country had a defined struggle. They had a common goal. That was the fight to end apartheid. Thus, we now have gone to becoming a 22-year-old democracy. And for me, if I think back to 2002 and the conversation we had with President Thabo Mbeki at the time, the question that sits for me, and the tough question that comes through for me, is what has changed since 2002 in that conversation that we had as an 8-year-old democracy? And I asked the president at the time what he thought the challenge for young people was, and he said education. And I agree with him. But my question is, have we really used the pivot of education to change the lives of young people? Because I think if we look at stats, and we'll discuss it today, we haven't seen a fundamental shift and change in terms of the lives of young people in this country. And so for us as a business school, it's a pleasure and a privilege to host a session like this here, to have a discussion with a group of analysts, a group of experts, but also a group of individuals from various parts of South Africa, from government, from business, from civil society, from academia, from labor, to really talk about what is the democracy project for young people. And for me, I was in Diepsloot on Wednesday this week, and we met a number of young people who are largely unemployed. And the question that we asked them was twofold. Was one, what is unemployment meant for you? And we spoke to most individuals under the age of 25. And Tim, I often say that people who are born and who are between the ages of 20 and 60 or 70 in 1990, 94, when you talk to them today, get a warm, fuzzy feeling when they talk about 1990 and they talk about 1994. When you talk to a young person who's 18 or 19-year-old today, they want born in 1994, and so they don't get the warm, fuzzy feeling. For them, the key question is whether democracy has had a fundamental impact in their life, and I really hope that we can answer some of those questions. So it's a pleasure to have the partnership with you, and thanks for coming to GIBS, and we warmly welcome all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdullah. Well, I told you about M&S attorneys, and they are our partners on this project. And Tobani?
Like a typical lawyer, I'm going to begin with a question. It's a very simple one, and I'm happy not to be able to answer it. The question is, what then do we make of a country that does not invest in its youth?
Yeah.
Tim, you and your panelists will appreciate that at 14 years, M&S is relatively in its youth. You will also appreciate that we have seasoned leaders that together with a very youthful staff complement are able to make sure that we not only drive the business with the vision of driving the business, but growing the business. And the only way to grow the business is to grow the future. The future is also pronounced the youth. So it is our pleasure, and it is in that spirit that we took up the opportunity as M&S attorneys to be part of this growing initiative, to make sure that the youth of South Africa are really empowered and opportunities are created. As you have already said, that the difficulty we have is that the economic growth is not at the pace that we would appreciate it. Thank you, Tim.
Much appreciated. Thanks, Tubani Nyandu. Peter Perkins, without further ado, from Stats SA, you do studies on these things, you give us all the numbers we need. Please, Peter, tell me that things are getting better.
Thank you, Tim. Good evening, everyone. Stats SA published a report on youth in April, and it draws statistics from a variety of surveys that we do. Generally, that report covered the periods 2009 to 2014, and it's quite wide-ranging. It touches on demography, for example, and health, living conditions, and the labor market. And I'm going to concentrate on issues regarding employment and unemployment, drawing numbers from the quarterly labor force survey. So let me start with the unemployment rate, which since around 2010 has been sitting at around 35%. And here I'm talking about the expanded definition of employment, which includes workers who have been discouraged from finding jobs. And it covers all age groups in the working age population, which is 15 to 64 years. And what we see for youth is unemployment rates which are somewhat higher than that. For the group 25 to 34, the unemployment rate is sitting at 63%, as we heard in the introduction. And for the group 25 to 34 years, it's sitting at 39%, as opposed to the total average of 35%. So what we see is substantially higher unemployment rates for the youth. And what that translates to in terms of actual numbers is for the group 25 to 34 years, 3.2 million people unemployed. That's in the age group 25 to 34. And to that we can add the age group 15 to 24, which is a further 2.3 million. So that gives us 5.5 million unemployed youth. And as a percentage of total unemployment, that's 65%.
Thanks very much, Peter. Much appreciated. Well, Lumkile Mondi.
Tim, thank you. Just linking on Peter, what we do know, particularly for the unemployment challenge, is that there's a gender twist. So women are more likely to be unemployed in rural areas, and African, as Peter has articulated. So the challenge, as Peter has highlighted, is growth is critical for economic growth. We saw in the period between 2002 and 2008 that companies that employ between 10 and 49 absorbed quite a lot of the youth between 15 and 24. There's a huge improvement and growth in the number of those employed. But if you look post the crisis between 2008 and 2014, we've seen that companies that are employing are those that employ people above, from 50 to above. This indicates to us that small and medium enterprises are far less resilient than bigger companies. So in that case, a lot of the job losses, Peter, I will argue, probably came from those small and medium enterprises who were not resilient due to the financial crisis that they've experienced. South Africa has a national development plan, which will articulate for us the way where we should be going. Neither the ruling party or government is really committed to the cause of preaching it and making sure that the policy alignment talks to it. For example, the South African government is very, very much in alliance with Labour. We understand very, very well one of the biggest barriers around employment creation is our bargaining environment, as well as those councils that determine how much wages has to be paid. And increasingly, wages in South Africa has been increasing, even now, under these very difficult conditions where many companies aren't finding markets internationally because of poor economic growth, and domestically because of real high administrative costs. What is very interesting about South Africa is the fact that the current ANC government has identified itself with black business. Most of us understand very, very well that what is called black business is probably a minuscule of the black population. I will argue here tonight that there is nothing called black business. There are minorities that are still in NAFCOC. The rest are professional organizations, whether it's my colleagues at Abasa, or even the Black Business Council itself. Some of the people, they're not entrepreneurial. We have a bunch of transactors in the black community. In South Africa, business is still in white hands. So with the ANC being so racially concerned, it doesn't have a conversation with that because it perceives them as beneficiaries and therefore needs to transform. So if you've got that and you don't have a dialogue with a black business, which I argue is very small because the rest are transactors and a bunch of opportunists who call themselves business just to milk the stage instead of the state using resources for the people to ensure that we can redistribute, we can have development. So we're in a crisis as far as state-business relationship are concerned. And we know that, that unemployment problem is black and is predominantly female. So this confusion around policy and the fact that we've got a national development plan which is very clear as what needs to be done, and the state continues to dance around issues which are very attractive, popular, because popular politics, when you use race as a measure, it's a very popular ticket for the ANC and any black party for that matter to be voted in. But it doesn't talk to the fundamental issues. The fundamental issues, Tim, are economic development, ensuring that our people can, on their own effort, have access to jobs, can sell their labor without being interfered with by organized labor, which at the moment is one of the barriers. So I think importantly, for us really to move forward and address these issues around unemployment, we have to look in the mirror and really ask ourselves, what does South Africa want to do? Do you want to resolve race, or do you want to economic development, which will lead to economic growth as embedded in our national development plan? So up until we focus on the plan and stop the other dancing around issues, which are important issues, but those issues don't address individual household issues which are about survival and ensuring that the kids have got a better future under a black government than they did under a white government. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks very much. You go first.
So I'm from Youth Lab, and what Youth Lab is a youth policy think tank. And our primary work is to mainstream youth perspectives on policy issues, both into the policy-making process, but also on the flip side, actually talking about policy to people that don't generally get to be in conversations like these. I want to start first by just talking about the fact that I think one of the biggest challenges we have and the inadequacies we have as people that are in the policy space is that we tend to treat youth as one big group. And so you say, yeah, no, it's youth. And it's supposed to be one homogenous group that you can put a label on. And then you make a national development plan and you're like, yeah, no, youth issues, sorted. And that's not the case. A young person who's 20 in Sandton faces something very different from a young person who's 20 who lives just down the road in Alex. And I think we're not always cognizant of those differences when thinking about things like the economy. I think one of the other bigger flaws is that we tend to treat the economy as a singular thing. And so the economy is also something that we can put in a box and say, this is an economic issue and everything else is separate. And we need to grow the economy and we can leave everything else out. So what are the opportunities for growth for young people like us? Entrepreneurship, right? That's kind of the buzzword now. Everyone talks about entrepreneurship and innovation. Here's the thing. You can't innovate yourself out of bad policies. You can't innovate yourself out of poverty, and actually you shouldn't have to, because this is why you have a government, right? We sell the story that entrepreneurship is for everyone, and it's not. Not everyone can run a business. Entrepreneurship is actually a skill. And so what we're saying to young people is, oh, shame, you don't have a job. No, start a business. Okay, cool, because that's really easy, right? Even if you can start a business, you're faced with red tape. And so even getting your business off the ground takes years and years and years. And then what happens? Say you start a business. Who are you supplying? So you have a government that's not necessarily willing to support young black businesses. You have communities that also aren't necessarily willing to do that. And so your business fails. And then what do? Start another business. Okay, that's a great idea. And I think that's one of the biggest lies we sell to young people is we say entrepreneurship is the way to solve our economic problems. And it's not. But we're also not providing ourselves with great alternatives either. So we say to young people, go work in the public service. The public service is full of old people who don't want to leave. I was at a conference where someone suggested that a department switches their file storage to the cloud. Everyone knows what the cloud is, right? Okay. And there was a gasp in the audience because people, A, didn't know what it was, and the thought of actually going digital frightened government employees. And so young people like us are sitting there frustrated because we have ideas, we have skills, we have competencies to get into the public service, but we're stuck. Another thing is I don't think we're adequately tracking how young people spend their money. Because if we know where they spend their money, our money, then we know where the biggest opportunities for growth are. So one of the things Youth Lab is currently doing is a township economies project in Tembisa. And the aim of the project is to map out the opportunities and the economic activities in the township. The overall aim is to keep money flowing in Tembisa. And from the research that we've done, most of the young people that we've worked with are making their money in townships, in Tembisa, but they're spending it elsewhere. They're spending it on things that you could easily find in Tembisa. But they won't because Mall of Africa is big and it's nice and it's fancy. And we have an aspirational culture and we want to go buy big, nice things. But also we're not shown that there's value in these little community businesses.
Well, let's pause for a while. All right, Ann?
Well, a lot of issues on the table here. We've released 7 documents that we're calling the Growth Agenda, Priorities for Mass Employment and Inclusion. And let me start with one part of the young people, which is the vast majority of unemployed people who do not have a tertiary education. Many of them don't even have matric. And many of them, increasing numbers of whom, live in households where nobody works. I find that a very shocking statistic. So that's one issue. That's who we're concerned about. And the fact is that unless South Africa grows at 4, 5, preferably higher than that per annum for 10 to 15 years, we're going to have more and more violence in our country and we're going to have more and more problems. So one of the key issues is, everybody says they want growth, Tim, but nobody wants change. If we keep doing what we've been doing for the last sort of period, we're not going to get growth and we're not going to get employment. So we need much higher growth and we need to make the policy changes that are required to get that. But even if we get high growth, we're not going to get the jobs this country needs because the nature of our growth strategy is aimed at high skill, high wage jobs, which is what Lumkili was saying. And the fact of the matter is, we don't have a high-skill population. I wish we did. We should have, but we don't. And what we need are jobs for the workforce we actually have today. The truth is we do not have a graduate unemployment problem. Let me explain this. There have been 2 pieces of work by the University of Stellenbosch which have looked at this, and it's up till 2014, so maybe things have got a bit worse. But the fact is, if you have a degree from a university, South Africa does not have, those people are not unemployed. They get jobs, might not be the job they want, but they get jobs. The people who are unemployed are people who've been to a vocational education institution, much higher unemployment rate, about 16%, and then the great swathe of unemployment are the people who don't have tertiary education at all. So we need to get some facts on the table about that, and the most important thing is South Africa needs jobs for the workforce we actually have, not the one we'd like to have. South Africa does not have sufficient industries and opportunities for low-skill people to get jobs they can actually do. Almost every country in the world that has moved from rural poverty to the kind of middle-class, richer society has gone through a phase of factory jobs that are low-paying initially, but are designed for but are appropriate for low-skilled people. So whether it's sewing the sort of label on my T-shirt or making a T-shirt, South Africa has said, no, we don't want those kinds of jobs. But we have that kind of workforce. So we're saying we need to look for low-skill manufacturing. We need to fix the labor situation so that we're not pushing wages way above productivity or way above what employers can bear. We have employers who leave South Africa and go to Lesotho, Swaziland, or elsewhere because of our collective bargaining situation. I want to just make one last point, because on my left and my right, whichever way you want to look, the issue of race has been raised. And I want to share how we see this. So I think that transforming South Africa in the sense of opening up opportunities, redistributing income, assets, everything we can think of to black South Africans who've been denied this for so long is an absolute priority in this country. But how we do it shouldn't be, oh, here we're going to think about transformation, and over here we're going to think about economic growth. And I don't think that's what Lumkili was suggesting. We're saying we have to, as a country, if we're going to grow at 5% per annum, we need everyone in this society to be skilled and participating and bringing their ideas and innovation and everything they can so that we can grow South Africa for everybody. What South Africa needs, if we're going to get high growth, is to look at how we ensure transformation for everybody, all those outsiders, rural women, rural people who can't get in, people who don't have a decent education, who can't get a job. We need to change that and link that to how we grow this economy at a much higher rate, because without that, and I want to stress this, the country is in deep trouble. And everything well, let me speak for myself. I believe in our Constitution. I think that the transition that happened in 1994 was really important. And I believe in the values of our Constitution, from the independent judiciary to freedom of the press and freedom of association. I can assure you that all these things we hold dear are under threat if we do not have growth in this economy and expansion of opportunities so that more and more South Africans have hope for the future.
So we'll pick up in a short while.
Yes, kulekile kaMakenzo. Namas balisa ngithi indodakazi yethu. Ine hair salon yayo. Lo muntu lo une LPA.
NPA.
Opa, Mr. Program Director. Thina bakamkhize would like to give a final parting gift. Bela. Dine. Ah, yes, indodakazi indodakazi yethu ubalisa ukhule nge-DS man ukhule abukela i-Disney Junior ukhule abukela umzansi wethu umzansi bioscope yini nisinika umdubulo
Siyabona le is for mahala.
wakayibona into equality emahala cela nihambe mahala
Umdubulo.
lobo postponiwe yeah.
Why settle for umdubulo when you can get quality entertainment? Keep it 99 with DSTV Access for only 99 Rand per month. DSTV Access, now ngayithola.
Well, our dialogue on growing South Africa and creating opportunities for the youth continues. We heard from the panelists, and this time we are going to hear from members of the audience. There's a lady there at the back.
My question is, I would like to address from the youth perspective, from 25 years old now, I'm part of the youth. I totally do believe in the fact that we still need to address the racial issues in order to solve the problem, and that we need to work together. And I agree with the transformation completely. However, in this room, the majority of the black people, and as a 25-year-old, I want to be able to speak to white 25-year-olds for them to be aware of the challenges that I'm facing, and for me to also understand where they're coming from. It's more of an awareness thing. I can't change someone's heart, and I can't